When we look back at video game magazines from the late 1980s and throughout the 1990s, there are several titles that come to mind. With me, I'm always thinking about Electronic Gaming Monthly, or EGM. I'm thinking about GamePro. I'm thinking about Video Games and Computer Entertainment, a magazine that I unfortunately don't see a lot of around these days. I think about GameFan. And another magazine that I think about that not a lot of other people seem to is a magazine called Game Players Magazine. My first experience with Game Players was when they were covering Nintendo games as kind of like an encyclopedia for Nintendo games. I had a couple of issues of that, or a couple of volumes of that, and while I found those pretty interesting, the screenshots were a little bit on the crude side, but still, it was interesting to read about Nintendo games, especially as someone who was just getting into Nintendo in 1990. So finding those issues and being able to read them was certainly a big deal. The other thing that I remember about Game Players magazine is the fact that they produced VHS tapes that were strategy guides, but in video format. Long before the internet would put strategy guides online that you can look at will, Game Players magazine would publish these strategy guides walking you through various NES games like Metal Gear or Castlevania 2, and those were awesome. I only rented maybe one or two, but they are available on YouTube, I think. If I remember right, the awesome people who run My Life in Gaming published a video or two from that collection that showed you what those strategy guides were like. But that was the experience that I had with Game Players. And then they kind of had a reawakening of sorts, and that is where this issue of Print from the Past, or this episode of Print from the Past, comes in. We're going to take a look at this issue of Game Players Sega Nintendo that features Total Carnage on the cover. This is from January 1994, and as we talked about in the last episode, these always had a month lead time, so this actually was on newsstand shelves in December of 1993, which makes this exactly 27 years old tonight. Not only do we have Total Carnage here, but we also have a strategy guide for Mega Man X. We have strategy for Sonic CD. We have all of these games listed on the side, from Luffy and Aladdin to Gauntlet 4, which I'm excited to read about. That's still a game I haven't had a chance to play. Lawnmower Man, Tournament Fighters, and more. There's also the promise, if you see down here in the corner, of a Rocket Knight card, and there is one indeed here. One of the reasons that I always bought these from newsstands rather than getting them sent to my house was that with newsstands, sometimes you got some extras in here, whether you got a poster or whether you got a card or some other kind of collectible, and this magazine is no different, as you're about to find out when we open it up. This is old. Again, it's 27 years old, so some of the seal has kind of torn off a little bit, so we're just going to go ahead and finish the job and open this up and see what is on the inside. I've been looking forward to opening this up. I've been looking forward to opening all of these magazines up, if I'm being completely honest. Just need to start the tear just a little bit more. There we go. So before I finish opening this up, because these are going to fall out, let me show you the collectibles that are on the inside. There are two of them. The first one is this Rocket Knight Adventures card from Konami. This guy right here. In addition to the artwork on the front with Sparkster, we have an introduction to the game in trading card form that has some really cool artwork, a decent amount of text. We do have the Konami logo down there in the corner. And if you noticed on the front here, because this is a Genesis-only game, so we had the officially licensed by Sega logo and the Sega Genesis logo as well. So this is pretty neat, but that's not the only thing that's here. Also on the inside, because we have a little guide for Virgin Games, we have this sticker for Robocop versus Terminator, Match Made in Hell, a game that I never played. But this is a sticker, so that is a cool addition as well. So let's go ahead and open this up. And I'm trying to do it so you can see it on camera. This is a little bit more difficult to open than actual video games are. There we go. Slide that off the front. And the first thing I'll show you before we get to the magazine is I want to show you the insert, which is the new games. This is a Virgin kind of addendum. And inside we have an ad for Robocop versus Terminator, where we got the sticker from. Never played it, like I said. We also have, we also have Jam It here. Virgin games, by and large, weren't very good, at least not that I remember. So there's a little bit of strategy here, talking about Jamet some. Those of you who follow my Retro Referee character, you will probably get a kick out of this, as it is a sports game, as it is. We also have some coverage of Robocop versus the Terminator here in print, so you can kind of take a look at some of the, or preview the game, as it were. We also have, let's see, what else do we have? We have Dune, the Battle for Arrakis. And another game that I haven't played, although I know we're getting a new or a remade Dune, I believe, soon. Young Merlin. I think that's based on a movie, if I'm not mistaken. And that's actually the ad on the back of the little mini magazine here. So Young Merlin. We've got more Dune, this one for Sega Cd. Sega Cd back at this time was a real thing, and a very promising thing at that, despite the fact that the technology was a little bit on the weak side. So you got a lot of that multimedia, as we talked about, where it is full motion video and gameplay kind of rolled into one. There's also an ad for Super Caesar's Palace here. All you gambling types might like that. I wasn't into casinos at that time. I'm more into them now. I think it might be a product of getting old, but I don't know. There's an ad here for Chuck Rock 2, or a little layout for Chuck Rock 2. Something for Demolition Man as well. The Terminator on Sega CD, which I heard has an absolutely fantastic soundtrack, although I have not played it or seen it. I believe the Angry Video Game Nerd did cover it, though. And that's about it. So this was included. It's not very exciting because it is Virgin Games, and again, you can see the list of games on the front, but they weren't great. But let's go ahead and take a look at the magazine itself. So this is Game Player's Sega Nintendo. This is a decent width, and I don't want to give away what's on the top there. It is a decent size. In fact, it looks like it is, I don't know how many pages, 167 plus pages, so that is not bad. And on the back, because it was coming out in just a couple of months, we do have an ad for NBA Jam right there on the back. Oh man. Jam Day, March 1994. I've told that story before. You've heard me talk about it on Unsealed. One of my favorite days of all time, despite the fact that I had to trudge to the mall in a snowstorm to pick up my game. But that's a story I might recall at another time. So let's go ahead and take a look on the inside. And the first thing we see is an ad for ASCII-Ware controllers with some alligators on the front there. I was not really a third-party controller guy, so all of these ads for me were just wastes of time. I skipped by them, to be honest. Then we take a look and see what's on the inside, and this is very colorful. It reminds me a little bit of GamePro, kind of, sort of, in terms of like the angled contents label there on the side. Again, very colorful. I like the look. It's definitely eye-popping. And there's a lot of stuff here. GP Press, Readers Network, now playing previews, GP Sports. So again, you have your own sports section here, which I'm very excited about. Tactics and Strategy, where they go over Code Breakers, which I guess is their secret code section. Tmnt, Paladin's Quest, Sonic CD, and Mega Man 6 are all here. We also have reviews for several different games. Some of the highlights are Aladdin, Batman the Animated Series, Gauntlet 4, The Lawnmower Man, Mega Man X, and TMNT Tournament Fighters, just to name a few. Then we have an ad for Clay Fighter here. He's a major kick in the mass. Ugh, that's a dad joke. Clay Fighter I played. I actually rented that from a Blockbuster video when it had come out, and if I'm being honest, I was not that impressed. I thought it was kind of funny, but it really did nothing for me in terms of a fighting engine. I was still very much a Street Fighter 2 guy and a little bit less of a Mortal Kombat guy, but Clay Fighter really just didn't do a lot for me. So we have an intro to Mortal Kombat 2 here. It says the wait is over. That's really the story that they're leading with, and why not? Mortal Kombat 2 was a very big deal when that hit arcades, and honestly is still a big deal today if you ask a lot of people. There's also an ad there for Yoshi's Cookie. Double Dragon at a theater near you. Oh my goodness. Bo Abobo. That's what I remember about the Double Dragon movie is Bo Abobo. And the weird animated mugshots they had in the film. And of course Alyssa Milano, but that's a story for another time. We also have stories about Namco and Sony joining for a new game machine. Oh, look at that. It looks like Sony is the next manufacturer to enter the lucrative game market. Remember, this is January of 94, or really December of 93. The company announced plans in Japan to develop a home video game system developed and produced by its Sony Computer Entertainment division. But an interesting move, Namco will supply all of the machine's game software, which isn't necessarily true, although they were certainly a big factor. And the two companies will combine research and development for Namco arcade games based on Sony's technology. I believe that was the System 11 hardware, if I'm remembering right. I'm not sure. According to Ken Kutaragi, the director of Sony Computer Entertainment, the company decided to branch out on its own after plans for a Nintendo-compatible 32-bit player failed. And that is the truth. Nintendo, of course, kind of ran away from Sony at the last minute, went to Philips, and then that fell through, and there was never any kind of CD add-on, and that gave rise to the Sony PlayStation, and we know what happened after that. One thing I remember about Game Players was that it tried to be funny. Sometimes the jokes landed and sometimes not. The top 10 rejected finishing moves. Number 10, the tickle them till they puke. Okay. The 9, the atomic wedgie. 8, the tie their shoelaces together. 7, the weasel drainer. Come on, man. 6, the mega noogie. 5, the put out their eye with a rubber band. 4, the haggis force feed. 3, the finger. 2, the turbo paper cut. And 1, the spine jolting cuddle of death. Again, I didn't write these. There's also an ad here telling you to play Mortal Kombat with the Turbo Touch 360. I would never recommend that to anyone. Turbo Touch was such a ripoff. Rise of the Robots in the works from JVC. Everyone remembers that Rise of the Robots is just terrible. This just in, Enix signs game King Arthur. Absolute acquires Extreme. Darkman sequel in the works, for those who cared. Capcom does battle with Data East. Capcom of Japan has filed a lawsuit against Data East of Japan, claiming the company's fighter's history violates Capcom's copyright on Street Fighter II. Yes, there was a lawsuit over that because, yes, Fighter's history is basically a Street Fighter II ripoff, and Capcom did not like it. Coin-Op Awards. NBA Jam won most played video game honors at the AMOA, which is the Amusement and Music Operators Association, at an award ceremony held during the Expo in 1993 in late October. Midway's Addams Family won most played pinball game. Addams Family Pinball is fantastic, by the way. Another ad here for Turbo Touch. You can play sports games with it. Again, not recommended, not in the slightest. Oh boy. So their Reader's Network is basically their letters to the editor. They had some postcards that were sent in, as you can see the pictures there. You also have Game Idea of the Month. It'd be like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, but you'd use Disney characters. Okay, that's interesting. Kind of like a Disney Smash Brothers. I could see that. Packages as a construction kit. Substitute basketball players. Just imagine swirling dunks from Kano, Superman dunks from Raiden, Scorpion's teleport passes, and freezing people to get the ball with F-Zero or with Sub-Zero. The title Mortal Dunks. I wonder if Mark Turmel actually saw that idea. I wonder if that would have worked. Pretty interesting. Battle with Mega Man characters. Use people from The Simpsons. Use movie monsters like Dracula, Wolfman, Frankenstein, and so on. Have it with aliens in the U.S. Marine Corps. And fight with Greek gods. Some of these ideas actually wound up becoming their own video game, although not necessarily the same thing. In Greek gods, of course, we saw God of War. Movie monsters like Dracula, Wolfman, Frankenstein. That was Van Helsing. We'll get to that in Unsealed, by the way, pretty soon. Use people from The Simpsons. We had our own Simpsons fighting game. Mega Man characters fighting back and forth. We saw Mega Man in Smash Brothers. Basketball players, well, a couple of them got their own video games in Michael Jordan and Shaquille O'Neal. And Disney characters, I don't think we've seen that yet, but that could be an interesting concept. Ask the Magic 8 Ball. Do the Genesis 2 and the regular Genesis take the same games? It is certain. Really? Can you hook a Game Boy to a regular TV to play? My sources say no. Because we would see the Super Game Boy down the line, and yes, you could play your Game Boy games on TV, but they didn't know that back in 1993. I heard a rumor that there was an adapter that allowed you to play Super Nintendo games on Genesis and vice versa. Is this true? Don't count on it. Certainly not with lawsuits in the offing. An ad here for X-Men for the Genesis and for the Game Gear. Awesome artwork. Not so awesome a game. I think I'd rather Konami's X-Men instead, but that's just me. The complaints counter. Why doesn't Nintendo put out game boxes like Sega's? That's actually a good question. Nintendo's cardboard boxes versus Sega's plastic ones, there was no contest. That's why Sega's game cases have held up a lot longer than Super Nintendo games have. It would make many people a lot happier because it would be a lot easier to keep up with the game's instruction manual and the box wouldn't get all torn up. That is so true. Perhaps Nintendo is being politically correct and using recycled paperboard in its boxes while Sega pollutes the planet with petroleum-based plastics. Okay. Or perhaps Nintendo's hoping you'll damage the game by dropping it from its crushed, torn cardboard box and you'll have to buy another one. Alright. Oh boy. The Impossible Dream. I'd like to know how to get blood and guts on Super Nintendo for Mortal Kombat. We all know how this worked. Mortal Kombat was sanitized for the Super Nintendo because Howard Lincoln was not a fan. Nintendo execs were not fans of having violence in that game to that extent, to that point, because they were worried about pressure from the government. And as it turns out, they would wind up having to change their minds with Mortal Kombat 2, which was for everyone's betterment. But by then, we had some kind of video game rating system in place. So here, this is neat. So here, we have a mini strategy guide for Mega Man X, which is right here, and it actually comes out of the magazine. I don't think I want to, well, I could take it out. And yeah, wow, that is really cool. And I've actually started to play Mega Man X collection for the Switch and for the Xbox One. And this would actually help me because I have never beaten Mega Man X, so I'm going to take this out a little bit later. But that's an example of game players kind of adapting. Now we have these fold-out strategy guides. They're decent material, decent paper, and I'm looking forward to looking at that a bit later on. I kind of want to take it out, but I'm worried that I'm going to ruin the paper. All right, hang on. This is just like removing posters from Nintendo Power. You have to be so careful. I'm almost there. There it is. All right. So I'm going to keep the magazine open over here and just show you. First of all, we got to get rid of this stuff. Yeah. There we go. So it is just it's a straight up strategy guide. So it shows you information about the different bosses and the different stages. It's not in depth. It is a mini strategy guide, but it gives you some information to go on, and it's pretty well made. I will definitely use this. This apparently is book number 3 of this series. That's really cool. I'm going to put that right over there, and we'll go back to the magazine here. More information here. This is just a lot of letters and a lot of stuff. Of course, this is just after the holiday, or really this is the last holiday issue, so of course they're going to cram a bunch of stuff in here. Do programmable pads, game genies, and other hardware that let you cheat enhance gameplay? Do they add replay value? So they're asking people if cheating is okay, and of course you're going to get different answers. I'm not going to go into all of those in this episode as it would make it even longer. But there's some fours or pros and cons against me. I'm not really a big cheat guy, at least in terms of game genies. I am a game code guy. Like if there's a cheat code to enter before a game, I will sometimes use that, but not a game genie. Not like the not that kind of, not hacking per se, but a modification. That's just not something that I've ever done. Then we have an ad for Wolfenstein 3D for the Super Nintendo, which never wound up happening. Or maybe it did happen. Actually, I changed my mind. I think the game did happen, but it was really sanitized. So what I believe wound up happening is that id Software wound up licensing the Wolfenstein engine to to Wisdom Tree, and they came out with Super Noah's Ark 3D. But that's not really the best looking ad for Wolfenstein. It just isn't. Some ads for Game Boy games. TMNT 3, Tiny Toon Adventures, and Batman the Animated Series. Game Boy was still a very big deal at this time in late 1993, early 1994. We wouldn't get the Game Boy Color for another few years, so there were still tons of games coming out for Game Boy, and with Konami you were getting really great licenses at the same time. Ren and Stimpy, Stimpy's Invention. We also, it's a Sega of America game. I don't think I've played this. It doesn't look too bad. But with Ren and Stimpy games, because I had such a bad experience with them on the Nintendo and Super Nintendo, I just never really cared to play anymore. It's not that the games wanted to be bad, I don't think. I think they looked pretty good, but just the idea for games trying to move from cartoons to video games didn't always work. We saw this happen with The Simpsons too. More games. Barney's Hide and Seek game from Sega. We have Lunar the Solar Star, which will of course become Lunar Silver Star Story. We have The Lost Vikings, and we have NFL Football 94 featuring Joe Montana. That game, awesome, by the way, continuing with the sports talk commentary, which I love so very much as a sports video game fan. So you get to see some of the screens there as we're talking Genesis and Sega CD on this particular page. An ad for the Power Plug, which you plug your controller into, and then it would turn your controller, I guess, into, it would give you extra features. This is, again, something I didn't own, so I don't know a lot about it. Definitely 90s, got that 90s attitude with the different colored font and the uppercase, very in-your-face. Not a surprise. That's just how we were in the 90s. We had that attitude era going on. More stuff. We have McDonald's Treasureland Adventure, which was from Treasure, of course. And we had new games for the Sega CD, talking up Ground Zero Texas, Prize Fighter, Double Switch, and Dragon's Lair. Also, Rescue Rangers 2 is featured on this particular page. Plus, we have an ad for Lemmings for the Game Boy. That's your thing. We have a Sonic Chaos ad for the Game Gear. Sonic, of course, was very important for Sega to move Sonic not only on its Genesis and eventually the Sega CD, but also on the Game Gear as well to make it enticing, as Sonic was a very big property at this point. Steven Seagal marked for gaming. Oh my goodness. Well, here you go. I'm not going to read the article to you, but that's, boy, that is what it is. And coincidentally, we have an ad for the incredible Crash Test Dummies over here on the other side. Steven Seagal and Jean-Claude Van Damme, they were big things in cinema at the time, and of course it made sense to have them in video games. So, not a surprise, but I was never a Seagal guy, and honestly, I was never really a Van Damme guy. Didn't do the character of Guile any favors in Street Fighter the movie. An ad for European Racers, it looks like, for the CD-ROM and also for Sega CD. I love this image of the sheriff here. It kind of reminds me of Road Rash, or what I would think a Road Rash sheriff or police officer would look like when they were pulling you over. Goofy looking, but it is what it is. More on Steven Seagal. Ad here for Ground Zero Texas. Sega CD was big on full motion video. Full motion video and multimedia in video games was certainly a big thing at this time. Digital pictures with Night Trap and with Sewer Shark and Ground Zero Texas and Tomcat Alley, certainly taking advantage of that full motion video technology. Bubsy comes back for more. You know, I'm going to take like 30 seconds. Bubsy gets a bad rap. People love picking on Bubsy in the 21st century. And I don't think it's fair. Bubsy was pretty remarkable, especially the first game. Bubsy 2, I'll grant you, is kind of a take it or leave it game. But Bubsy, with the very clear voice samples, the color, the colorful look of the game, the expansive level design, even though it might be too expansive where it was kind of easy to get lost, it was really impressive for its time period. I enjoyed it especially on the Super Nintendo, honestly. I've played the Sega Genesis version, it's okay. But I just think that people, in retrospect, kind of like how people pick on Gex, it's the same kind of thing now, where we went through this period in history where it was mascot everything. And I think Bubsy stood out. I think Bubsy was funny. I do like the puns that were used in the games. I like the catchphrases. Maybe I'm in the minority, and that may be true, but like I said, I just think that Bubsy gets kind of a bad rap. And we have an ad here for Secret of Mana. What a gorgeous image. Just the lush greens and the scope, the largeness of the trees and of the vegetation versus the smallness of the characters just made it feel like it was a huge game, and for its time it was, even if the AI was dumb as a box of rocks. The music was great. That is the game, and I've told the story, that I wanted to get brand new. I wanted to get it when it came out. I was laid off from the phone company. Money was really tight. So I ended up trading away my TurboGrafx CD and Super System card for a Secret of Mana cartridge. Of course, it looks really stupid in hindsight because TurboGrafx 16 CD in this day and age would be worth 4 of those cartridges. But back then, I did what I had to in order to get the new games that I wanted to play. That was just kind of what I did, and I don't beat around the bush. I definitely have regrets about some things that I've sold off over the years. Now we get to our review section, and there are a lot of reviews to get through. The magazine just kind of walks you through their review process that you can see there, and we'll just take a look at some of the games that are reviewed here really quickly. So Total Carnage was reviewed, and it's pretty interesting that I'm doing this video on a Monday night. I like to call Mondays Midway Mondays because I'm a big fan of Midway arcade games, which Total Carnage certainly is. For those that don't know, Total Carnage is kind of sort of a Smash TV sequel, although it riffs on the Gulf War at the time. So it is not this futuristic game show, but more this kind of sort of futuristic Middle Eastern war zone setting, but plays very much like your Robotron, where it's this twin stick shooter and it's kind of out of control. And the Super Nintendo port of the game, to me, is not bad. I'm not sure if they fully review it here. The first page doesn't show a lot, except it does show some images that you can see there. To me, I think that the game looks like the arcade game. It may not be quite as large or quite as detailed, but it's still handled pretty well and was very suitable for the Super Nintendo controller, much like Smash TV was, where you use the D-pad for move and you use the 4 face buttons, kind of like directions for firing. So if you want to fire up, you press the X button. If you want to fire up and to the right, you pressed X and B together to fire that diagonal shot. And to me, that just worked. Total Carnage was not necessarily the sequel to Smash TV that we wanted, but I think it worked pretty well for the kind of game that it was. So they gave it a 77. Not to spoiler it, but there it is, 77, which is a good game. Not great, but a good game. Anything like, if you think about grading like in school, the 77 is an average. It's a C, which I think works well for this particular game. It did not hit home like Smash TV did, but it still had the same kind of sensibilities. The review does mention that the control is very good, that the replay value is very good. The music, unfortunately, is not, and the graphics are kind of middle of the road. You also have AH3 Thunderstrike for the Sega CD reviewed here. It gets a 90. So you can take a look at that right there. I don't think I have that for the Sega CD, but this is definitely one of the higher rated Sega CD games that you would see. Super Battle Tank 2 for the Super Nintendo gets a 72. So you can see that right there. I tried to play the first Super Battle Tank because it looked pretty cool in Nintendo Power, and it just wasn't for me. If I'm playing a tank game, I'm playing Battlezone from Atari. That's just my thing. There's a review for Turn and Burn, which is kind of like a Top Gun-ish type game for the Super Nintendo. And also, just calling attention to the ad here for Luffy and the Fortress of Doom. Luffy is a pretty darn good RPG. It's not necessarily as professionally presented as, say, or as clean looking as a Final Fantasy II or a Final Fantasy III, but it certainly holds its own. It's a lot of fun to play and takes a lot of hours to get through. And you know that it's a good game because it still holds up, at least in terms of value on the open market today, to get that for your Super Nintendo if you wanted to buy the game. So Turn and Burn winds up getting an 82. Reviewer Chris says it's not as detailed as most PC flight sims, but it's still a great effort. Arcade fans should take note, however, that this game is a real combat game and not a blast 'em up. I'm more of a blast 'em up guy than a sim guy, so this probably would be a game for me, although it does look very good. Ah, yes, the Lawnmower Man for the Super Nintendo. So, if you haven't seen The Lawnmower Man, if you haven't read it or you don't know of it, it's basically a movie that looks into virtual reality. Virtual reality during the 1990s was really supposed to be the next big thing. And of course, here we are in 2020, and while it's gaining, it is not quite the next big thing that everyone has thought it was going to be. But the way that it was portrayed in this, not a horror movie, but definitely a suspense slash action movie, was just really cool, and I wanted to get the game, and I really enjoyed the game, even though it was quite simple. But it was more for the virtual reality sequences than it was for the platforming slash action sequences in the game. The virtual reality sequences looked fantastic. The platforming sequences were kind of fell flat a little bit, and I'll be curious to see what they say for a review for the game. But you get to see here the difference between the platforming sections and then the VR sections, which on the Super Nintendo ran really, really well. The game got a 74. Vince, the reviewer, says, this solid title features such a variety of gameplay that it shouldn't be overlooked. And I agree with that. We see more here on the virtual reality worlds up top, and we have more on terms of puzzles and in terms of other kinds of gameplay down at the bottom. I do recommend it for the Super Nintendo and even for the Genesis. The Sega CD version is prohibitively expensive. I have not had an opportunity to play it, and I'd really like to look into it at some point if I could find a good deal on it. Disney's Aladdin for the Super Nintendo, getting a very colorful look here, a 2-page spread. I have not played this. I have not played Aladdin for either console. So when people ask, what version of Aladdin is better? I really don't know. And if I'm being honest, I really don't care. These particular games just are not my cup of tea. So I really don't have an opinion either way. Aladdin for the Super Nintendo does get an 85%. Jeff says, quote, Capcom's Aladdin is pretty hot. It plays great and looks even better, but anyone searching for that ultimate challenge needs to look elsewhere. So I guess what they're saying is it's a little bit on the easy side. That's not necessarily a bad thing, I don't think. But back in the 90s, we wanted games to be difficult and we wanted to be challenged. But now as an old man pushing 50 in 2020, I don't want to be as challenged as I do just want to be able to play through a game and enjoy myself. Also have an ad here for a game that we saw reviewed earlier in the AH3 Thunderstrike game. You have a review of Ren and Stimpy for the NES, Buckaroos. I don't think this is going to review well, if you ask me, but I'm not sure. Let me take a look and see. It's actually a 3-page review, but the pages are all separated by ads, which is kind of unfortunate. So you got an ad for the Untouchables. Then we have an ad for Wiz and Liz as we get to our second page of the review. Yo. And then the third page of the review finally gets us there, a 75. Billy says, quote, followers of the cartoon are going to enjoy its inside jokes, but everyone can enjoy its clever mix of puzzles and action. One of the best NES titles this month. I don't know if that's really saying anything in the early to mid 1990s, but take it as it is. Roar of the Beast from Beauty and the Beast gets a 51. Doug says, poor Doug. The graphics may be beautiful, but the controls are a beast. Ah, I see what you did there. Combined with its repetitive nature, this game may have you pulling out your fur or hair. Okay, sure. Beauty and the Beast on the Genesis gets a 2-page layout, plus we see a fun little activity for Ren and Stimpy over here on this side, where I believe you can connect the dots. And Beauty and the Beast on the Genesis gets an 83. Although it's a relatively easy game, the great graphics and well-crafted mix of problem-solving and arcade action make the game worth the money. And yes, Stimpy's invention, by the way, is there on that side. So a lot of games to get through as, again, we're wrapping up the holiday season with this particular issue. Here is the review of the Fortress of Doom for the Super Nintendo. We also have an ad for Tecmo Super Bowl and for Tecmo Super NBA Basketball. Both fantastic sports games for their respective systems. I do prefer the Super Nintendo versions to their Sega Genesis counterparts, but if you have only one or the other, you can't go wrong with either. So again, Luffy, a fantastic RPG, not going to be the top-line RPG like your Final Fantasies of the world, but still very much worth playing if you can find it for a decent price on the open market. The review is actually 3 pages long, and they wind up giving it a 90, which is about where I'd put it. It's not quite A territory, but it's definitely A-, maybe B+ or high end, but I think 90 is about right. The music is probably the weaker portion of the game, but the extras and the replay value are definitely there. Eric, the reviewer, says, if you think the age-old confrontation between good and evil has been done to death, try Lufia. It's as good an RPG as you could hope for. And those are pretty good words indeed. We have a review for Ranma 1/2 in here. Gets an 84. Billy says this is a really cool alternative to traditional Street Fighter-esque games. The only thing keeping it from truly awesome status is its sound effects and bad translations of the funny stuff. And that bad translations, that was just going to be a thing that would happen. There's also an interesting ad for the Dragon Strike VHS game. Is it a video? Is it a game? Is it both? Find out with Dragon Strike. Tournament Fighters for the Genesis gets a 69. A good game, but still a disappointment after playing other brawlers, including the Super Nintendo version of the game. It's a good title to add to your fighting game collection, but not to start it. That's interesting. And I think, gosh, you know, it's going to sound unfair, but even when we look at Hyperstone Heist versus Turtles in Time, Genesis versus Super Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, at least in my view, still comes out just a little bit ahead. Now, granted, it's not a bad game. Hyperstone Heist is far from a bad game, but it's not quite the groundbreaker that Turtles in Time is, at least in my opinion. Unfortunately, the Turtles Tournament Fighter game for the Genesis is definitely a step down from the more slick-looking and better-sounding Tournament Fighters game for the Super. Gauntlet 4 for the Genesis. I am not a Gauntlet guy. I've talked about Gauntlet in the past and how I liked watching it in arcades. And I've played it a little bit, and of course it gave rise to some of my favorite games of all time, including Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance and Champions of Norath. But Gauntlet 4 is a game that just kind of slipped under my radar, and I've heard nothing but good things about it, and I don't know why I never bought it. And now, of course, it's starting to get expensive, and I just don't own it. Gauntlet 4 got an 80. You get the most out of this game with 2 or more people, but regardless of how you play, you get your money's worth because of the added features. Basically, however, it's the same old Gauntlet, according to Vince, the reviewer. I believe, if I remember right, and you can correct me in the comments, I think that this is what the first game that M2 worked on. I could be wrong, but I believe that's the case. There's also an ad here for the program pad from STD, and I will not go any further with that reference. You read into it yourself. Ren and Stimpy, The Quest for the Shaven Yak for the Game Gear gets an 84. Man, you know, I've owned a lot of systems in my time. I've owned a Game Boy, I've owned a Game Boy Pocket, a Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance. I've never owned a Game Gear. And I kind of regret it. Unfortunately, I've heard that Game Gears this day and age don't hold up well, and a lot of them are faulty. And that's kind of too bad. I would really like to have a Game Gear to be able to play on my own and experience some of those games, because I never played any of them. The only portable Sega system I had was the Nomad, which was a battery eater, but a fantastic way to play NHL 96 when I was on my lunch break at work. Mega Man X gets a 95. It has only a one-page review. For a 95% game, that is a little sus. A little bit. But the game reviewed very well. Chris says, Mega Man fans won't be disappointed with X. It's easily the best of the 10 Mega Man titles so far and one of the best games I've played all year. And it gets a one-page spread. A near-perfect cart with classic video game play. And the Storm Eagle stage sound or music is amazing. Also have reviews here for Pink Goes to Hollywood for the Genesis, gets a 68. The Adventures of Dr. Franken for the Super Nintendo gets a 73. Dashin' Desperados for the Genesis gets a 71. Pirates Gold for the Genesis gets an 89, so that's pretty well reviewed. A must-have in any Adventurers collection, says Vince. You'll want to make other RPGs walk the plank. Last Action Hero for the Super gets a 33. If dull, lifeless, and frustration-filled fight games are your thing, Last Action Hero has just what you're looking for, says Billy. It's a flop just like the movie. Ouch. The game only sold for $40, and I can kind of see why that would be. Mario's Time Machine for the Super gets a 75. This game has better audio and visuals than many edutainment titles, but since it's a short, highly linear game, most kids will likely play through it only once or twice. Batman the Animated Series for the Game Boy gets a 70. So you can see those reviews right there. I'm sorry I haven't shown a lot of these. Then comes the GP Sports section, and just like GamePro did, and I think that EGM has done as well, you did get separate sports sections because not everyone was into sports games like I am. Some weirdo that I am, but that's the way it is. Here's something interesting. Tecmo changes review policy. Nintendo and Sega licensee Tecmo has instigated a special policy regarding its Tecmo Super Bowl. Unless magazines agree to show their editorial coverage to Tecmo for examination and possible change, advanced copies of the game won't be provided. Since Game Players makes it a policy to never allow companies to review copy, we regret that we'll be unable to give our readers previews or advanced reviews of Tecmo Super Bowl. We're looking forward to it as much as you are, so hopefully Tecmo will soon change its policy. So even back in the mid-1990s, video game publishers were kind of pulling strings a little bit with magazines and with video game reviewers, and that is unfortunate because the Super Nintendo version of Tecmo Super Bowl was amazing. The Genesis version was not quite as amazing. So it is unfortunate that Tecmo took that hardline stance. We have a look at FIFA International Soccer and at AWS Pro Move Soccer. So soccer was the big story this month in GP Sports. AWS got just a 60, and FIFA got a 93 on the Genesis, and that is with good reason. FIFA has been the bar setter for a long time. Sidekicks, or Tony Miola's Sidekick Soccer, got a 72. I actually liked that game when I reviewed it for a certain Super Nintendo guidebook. I liked the fact that that it had the scaling and rotation that NCAA basketball had, and I thought that worked a little bit better than NHL Stanley Cup, but that's just me. Pro Sport Hockey for the Super Nintendo got a 49. I can see why. The game was not very good. There's an ad here for Vidiot's on the side. We still have a lot of magazine to get through. This is going to push an hour. Oh boy. Riddick Bowe Boxing gets a 53, and we get to talk to Chris Chelios off the ice. Here's Chris there talking to the Game Players staff. You could win a Blackhawks hat signed by Chris Chelios or a Blackhawks jersey. And that was only through Game Players, so that's pretty cool. So there was a section where you could send in your questions about games, and they would try to answer them in terms of whether you were stuck or lost. So that's pretty neat. And more of these. And there's a, they talk about Brawl Brothers a little bit, and you can see some of the maps that they drew, or they put the images together. They splice them together to make a map, so that's pretty cool. You have Code Breakers, which are basically cheat codes for games like Revenge of the Joker, Mario Love You Hockey, Echo the Dolphin, Super Slapshot, Zombies Ate My Neighbors. I was playing Zombies Ate My Neighbors for Super Nintendo and found this code. Enter continue and input BCDF. It now takes you back to the title screen. Then press start to begin the game. Before the first stage, you can gain some prizes in the bonus stage, Day of the Tentacle. The magazine responds, you may not know it, Zach, but the bonus round may also be a LucasArts commercial. Day of the Tentacle is the company's new graphic adventure for PCs, the sequel to Maniac Mansion. So there you go. So a whole bunch of codes here, not just cheat codes, but also Game Genie stuff for those who had it. And those were vital pieces of information for video game magazines back in the day. An ad here for Lethal Enforcers with the Justifier. That's the Sega CD version, the version that you wanted to get if you were interested in this game back in the day, because it sounded and looked just like the arcade. And the Justifier, of course, was basically pulled right out of the arcade. It's pretty well made. I like Lethal Enforcers, if I'm being honest, but it's not, it doesn't hold up well. But for its time, I think it was a pretty good game. Some strategy for Tmnt, for those of you who are Sim fans. Some ads here for Codemasters games, for Micro Machines, Fantastic Dizzy, Cosmic Spacehead, and Dino Basher. Very colorful. What are you playing at? I didn't play any of those games, I'll tell you that right now. Wolfenstein 3D for the... So yeah, it did come out for the Super Nintendo. I knew that I was wrong when I had said it, but there are some screenshots from the game, as well as an ad for Tony Miola's Sidekick Soccer there. By the way, Wolfenstein 3D running on the Xbox 360 or now on the Xbox One, I'm actually enjoying that. I didn't play it much on PC, but after getting it is kind of like getting it from Xbox Live Arcade, I've actually appreciated it a lot more. I've gotten into that in the original Doom and Doom 2. Better late than never, right? It's an ad here for Toe Jam and Earl, Panic on Funkotron. Again, very colorful. Toe Jam and Earl take off on a Funkotronic new voyage. I'm reading that backwards because I don't have my image reversed on my screen here. What else do we have? Because I know we're running short on time. An ad here for TMNT Tournament Fighters. And a fold-out for $10 back on Rocket Knight Adventures, Zombies Ate My Neighbors, or Tiny Toon Adventures. So there you go right there. Go ahead, pick a fight, they say. I believe that's my buddy Donatello there, my favorite turtle there on this side. Love Donatello. Love playing as him in Turtles in Time. We have some strategy for Paladin's Quest in here, which I'm not going to show just for the sake of time, since we're pushing 50 minutes now. An ad for Rock and Roll Racing from Blizzard, of all places. Of course, before StarCraft and before Diablo, Rock and Roll Racing is their thing, and darn good game. If you like RC Pro-Am, you're going to like this game a lot. It's also available for Game Boy Advance, and that's a really good portable version of the game. Sonic CD, I should probably hold on to this, because Sonic CD, as much as I want to like it, I get confused when I play it, so maybe a strategy guide will help me out a little bit and make me appreciate it just a little bit more. It is just so easy to get lost in that game. It's very confusing. And yes, I prefer the American soundtrack over the European. Sorry. We have strategies for Mega Man 6, which I believe is for the NES. We also have some game book or guidebook collections, including Super Mario World Game Secrets, Legend of Zelda Link to the Past Secrets, Sega Genesis Secrets, Super Nintendo Game Secrets, and more. I want to get more of these, but I'm trying to find them in good shape. This ad right here, where everyone would answer these puzzles right and no one would ever win a darn thing. I used to see those every month. I'm like, maybe this is the month I'm going to send my money in, and I never did it. I don't know anyone who ever won one of those, and I honestly don't know whether they gave any of those things away. Then in the back of the magazine, you had this full review archive of games that they had reviewed recently. I'm not going to go through all of those, but this is a nice little library or archive of reviews to go through if you weren't sure of what games to buy. And remember, back then we didn't have internet yet, so this is the only way other than renting games to find out whether a game might be worth your money or not. Also listed here is the Software Etc. Top 10 for October of 1993. Number 10 was Super Mario All-Stars for the Super Nintendo. 9 was Seventh Saga for some reason for the Super Nintendo. 8 is Bill Walsh Football. 7 is Street Fighter II Special Champion Edition for the Genesis. 6 is Aladdin for the Genesis. 5 is Joe Montana 93 for Sega CD. Really? 4 is Mortal Kombat for the Super Nintendo. 3 is Sylphid for the Sega CD. Fantastic game. Utterly fantastic. 2 is Mortal Kombat for the Genesis. And number 1 is NHL Hockey 94. Wow, NHL 94, a popular game? Who knew? And that is about it for this issue. And finally, we have another ad from STD and the back of the magazine. This is a really cool magazine. I'm going to enjoy leafing through this on my own time and reading through the reviews more specifically. It's a very colorful magazine, a lot of screenshots, a lot of high-quality screenshots, certainly a step forward from what Game Players used to be, and we'll be opening more issues of this magazine in coming issues, or coming episodes, I should say, of Print from the Past. Until that next time comes, and we'll do another one of these next week, please take care of yourselves and each other during this really weird time, and again, we'll do it again soon. Take care. See you later.